Hi, everyone. This is Matthew from Survivor Now podcast. Today, I am joined by Laurence, the 12th castaway eliminated from Survivor UK. Laurence, you placed 7th place, but as we like to say here, you were 6th runner up. Are you all caught up with the episodes?
I did watch my own one after one full all-nighter of no sleep and lots of drinkies with friends present. So many of the details are a bit blurry, but for the large, case, I know what's going on. Well, ultimately, of course, I'm booted out, but I did know that beforehand as well. So
What was it like watching your episode? Was there a sense of relief after?
yes, I didn't really know what to expect because it was a lot of chaos. And also, having watched the previous episode, I thought, oh dear God, this is where everyone was like, who is this moron? Who is this stinker? But what it did show, it was really sort of my perception was just how chaotic that particular episode was and how our time there. It wasn't just my imagination, really, everyone was running around like a headless chicken.
It felt like it watching the episode. I'm sure we'll talk about that one. I have a lot of questions, especially about Tanuke's blindside exit. But let's start at the very beginning of your gameplay. Where I started really noticing your game was when you were sent to the outpost. So you chose to give up a clue to the hidden immunity idol by taking back a large fish for your tribe. I have to know, was the knowledge alone that a clue was in fact in the game enough for you to go out and enough of a clue for the idol for you, just the knowledge of it?
In a sense, yes, but also I was thinking from a very sort of practical standpoint. So an idol at this point doesn't change my game at all. There was no one who was really gunning for me in my tribe. I also knew exactly how this sort of thing was perceived. The first thing anyone thinks on an outpost sort of trip is there's going to be a choice for an idol. So I wanted to remain as clean as possible and be completely overt. I chose not something for myself, but rather for the tribe. And that was consistent in what I was doing before because I wasn't seen as sort of politicking around and was generally well liked and had no target. So I had no reason to sort of mess that up.
And why did you feel compelled to share with Tanuke the information that there was, in fact, an idol at Calaton Beach?
Well, in truth, was because of that conversation that we had with Chris, where it was revealed that there was a midling fish. And again, this is exactly why I should have watched more Survivor before getting in onto this, because I thought at the time I was making a sensible idea by suppressing any mention of the middle fish. But little, of course, I knew is that exactly the same as playing off on the other side, and that this, as I find out, there is no secret in Survivor that goes unsaid eventually. So in this case, once it was revealed that there was a middling fish, people were like, So it's like, I will preempt all of that by telling my closest allies immediately in order to prevent this being blown up in my face later. Which, with even though I still made the sort of altruistic choice, it would still, the fact that I suppressed one of the choices would call into question the sort of clean image I'd had previously. And I want to preempt that as rapidly as possible.
Right, because it was your strategy to sort of remain in this neutral zone, right?
Hmm.
Wow. There were many opportunities that we saw from you in terms of your gameplay. I do have to ask the question, when you were approached by Christopher at that one challenge about your experience at the outpost, did you intend to paint a target onto Ren?
Um, no, because I immediately realized, if I paint a target on her, it will paint one on me. But at the same time, I was so full of glee that she was suckered into that that I couldn't help myself. But that was ultimately the outcome. Yeah. And of course, Chris knew exactly what he was doing.
Right, right. As we all saw later in the episodes as well. And now you seem to also have a really great working relationship with Shai, despite many castaways wanting to vote him out. Was Shai a part of your long term strategy?
Without a doubt. So Shai was brilliant on many levels. He and I recognized from the beginning he knew everything about the show. He really was a super fan. He was also very sort of physically gifted. He was bloody good at all the challenges, and he was also just a very good friend, really. And I also took advantage a lot of the fact that because he was there to play the game, because he was quite strategic, and because he was no stranger to politicking, that in this sort of very non-survivor sort of cast had there, he would be seen as sneaky and politicky, and so would have a target from day one. And so I was, well, puts me in a brilliant position because I'm still good friends with everybody else, but at the same time, I'm benefiting them from being Shai's ally because I'm able to be the play the Dumbo in the back, scratching my bum on the beach, while he goes through, does all these moves that are seen as unsavory by others, and builds a terrible reputation on the other side as well. Like he really was. Lee and Shai couldn't help themselves at every challenge. Shai was so passionate and like making our team win that he should be like shouting on the other side, and Lee, of course, should be returning it back. And obviously, that's not what you want to be doing. You don't want to antagonize an entire other side for no particular reason. And so I was really sort of allowing him to get sort of all the black marks going that way, while remaining looking fairly good on my side.
That's fascinating. So it really was you sort of using Shai as more of your shield.
Yeah, really piggybacking on his approach and still looking innocent. Didn't work as well as I thought, unfortunately. But
Well, did that play into your decision for you and Shai to align with there was the tribe swap, right? And you got Doug and Pegleg. They were moved over from Lenena to Calaton. Did what you just mentioned about working with Shai as sort of keeping him as your shield, did that play into your strategy of aligning yourself with Pegleg and Doug to take out numbers from your original tribe?
absolutely. And it was also, I still think, the logical thing to do, because at that point, Jess had previously sort of voted for me and made very clear his views on Shai. And as these things are in the survival world, like you can trust your firstborn child to somebody in the real world, but in Survivor, that same person, if they've done even the smallest thing, and that could be vote or say to vote, it is nearly impossible. I'd say impossible to regain that trust in the future. So while we talk a lot about keeping Calaton strong, at that point it was clear that, okay, even if we do go by this, my name will still be on her lips 5 votes later. So it made sense to throw in our boat with a whole new bunch where that trust had not been tampered with, and vote Jess out.
What do you think went wrong after Jess was voted out? Your intention was to then vote out Nathan, but that didn't happen. You ended up being blindsided, and Shai ended up being the one to go. Where do you think things went wrong with your relationship with Doug and Pegleg, or in terms of their strategy that caused that to happen instead of what your intended outcome was?
And it was probably at that point when you realize that, of course, our decisions don't exist in a vacuum. And if we're using sneaky strategies, well, who is surprised when those sneaky strategies come back and spank you? So very fair enough. Peg and Doug did a very charming job of, and I could never hold it against them, but they very strategically went back and. I don't know what they could have done differently or what we could have done differently. I think ultimately, it was clear that they would come out looking better for voting Shai out, because Shai was really had made such a foul name for himself, in particular for voting Jess out because she's seen quite well on the other side. That they thought they're going to get some brownie points for this, and they knew that Nathan was desperate at this point, and that he would happily serve him. Plus, of course, Nathan and Doug just got along rather well as well. So there's a certain element of that. So
Oh,
fair enough. Wrong end of the stick. And I was completely baffled when it happened. I was really like, oh God. And I really knew, you could see my days are counted. There's things are looking bad. And we got back to the beach. And these are literally the loveliest 3 people you can imagine spending on a beach with. But I was like, okay, one more day, one more vote, and I'm out. And our tribe was so small at this point, so the merge could not have come at a better moment.
that's right. Well, you have to endure those low points only for the high points to feel so significant. So, congratulations, you won an individual immunity challenge. How did having safety affect your preparation for tribal council that night?
Well, mind you, I've really found that winning immunity isn't such a good thing. It seems to be a trend that whoever wins immunity, the next one will have votes against them. And this wasn't, it's not a causal relationship, but I think there are definitely factors involved there. Um, I was very happy. As you probably saw, I always sort of try to be as inconspicuous as possible during tribal councils, and would basically say a lot of nonsense. Um, because in tribal councils, often like people always were so vague or cryptic, or said nothing at all and just repeated the same taglines like, "Oh, it's so nice to be here," that sort of thing. I tried to sort of add something humorous in, or something like to show how clueless I am. That was different, and so it always sort of cracked people up. So that was always my approach, and that one was nice because I could sort of hide in the back and let them slaughter each other. I at no point wanted to show any particular alignment with anybody in a way that would rub other people up. So my constant strategy of the neutral Switzerland was my approach.
Well, it seemed like you didn't stop playing the game after winning immunity because you ended up revealing to Tanuke that there was a plan to blindside her that was in the works. What was your goal with telling Tanuke this information?
Ooh, this is a particularly complex one. This is a combination of a sort of strategy, trying to keep everyone online, a twisted sort of ethical dilemma as well. So
Okay.
I knew that Tanuki and Nathan had to be separated, and that ultimately they were a pretty powerful duo, and that they were sort of um, trying to run things their own way. And so my obvious target was Nathan, who, even though we'd gone along super well, we were sleeping on the beach together, nothing dirty, just literally sleeping next to each other in the sand, to clarify. But like we were getting along like a house on fire. However, that element of survivor sort of trust was niggling away, and no doubt, and this came out ultimately, like because I'd voted for him once, um, you know, my days were numbered as far as he was concerned. So for me, it was obvious to go for Nathan. However, at some point, Matthew was very keen to go for Tanuki, and so were some of the other members. And I didn't have the clout to be able to convince him to do Nathan. So I did the best I could think of and come up with a very sort of elaborate, ethical, like worm around things, and was like, well, I won't vote her out, so I can say I did not vote you out, but of course, completely aware of the plan, and also putting in my vote in such a way that I voted for Peg, told him that I'm going to vote for him as a throwaway vote, and it was clear that me voting that way would not make a difference in the ultimate plan. This is sort of a very stupid thing. I often make these sort of very technical versions of morality, and like a mission of truth here. I thought, okay, we can be a bit flexible on this particular moral thing on the game of Survivor, but also being very literal about things like I did not vote for you. In the same way, when I was very young, I'm not sure why I keep bringing this example up, I promised that I would never smoke a cigarette. So since then, anything that's not strictly a cigarette, I can smoke. So it's come to the point where a lawyer explained to me that rollies, are not cigarettes, so I could smoke them. So, but yeah, at some point it becomes quite ludicrous. Nonetheless, like I gripped on because integrity, at least your own conception of integrity is so important, particularly when you're starving and miserable and God knows what you're doing, and
Mm-hmm.
you're really a bit guilty about all the things you're doing. It was very important. But anyways, and I thought, okay, like if I also play a bit of that jury management role, she already thinks I'm going to vote for her. I can at least try to somehow save that in some way, and also prove that I do have some weird sense of loyalty within the framework of this very complex backstabbing fiesta. And so I thought, well, if I drop this little bomb on her literally a minute before this, that way she knows. And secondly, doesn't have much of a shot, but has some chance to turn things around as opposed to like walking straight into a landmine. And my conscience is somewhat cleared. Two things that I didn't expect is firstly that she would use that 1 minute, and they extended that time a bit to my absolute fury. would go charging around everybody, asking them, sort of, oh man, so of course here my name's being dragged through the mud, like what a great idiot, Laurence spilled the beans. And that also at the tribal council itself, she didn't really believe that she gave me a hug as she was leaving, and she was really poor her, she was really devastated. She asked me, like, did you vote for me? And I said no. And she wasn't convinced. So she still thought, she only found out later that I hadn't actually voted for her, and she was still baffled. She wouldn't have believed that it was Matty after all. So not a very effective approach. There was some logic behind it, limited, but don't forget, I was starving and in terrible condition. So
You mentioned perception by the jury, perception by Tanuke. I mean, how were you really hoping that especially the vote on peg leg, how were you hoping that was going to be perceived? Because you did have the option to tie the votes between Christopher and Tanuke and see if a different outcome could come from there. Was that ever on your mind to do that? And then again, what were you hoping the perception would be to this move?
Well, the voting for Pegleg was simple. He knew that I'd put him up, so I don't think that would be a problem. And even further on in the jury, no one would necessarily be particularly upset about that. In terms of Chris, I still saw, as did everyone else, that Chris is just a can being kicked down the road. In terms of, well, we're going to vote him out anyways. But of course, we've seen in the past that this particular can is a very durable can, and he's very good at evading being kicked into the bin as opposed to further down the road. So we thought, okay, now's our only opportunity really to get rid of this queen, while at the same time we'd really exhausted using Chris as a sort of decoy for which to vote it. Like, this was sort of running joke at the end because he'd really come up for being voted so many times before. So at this point, I thought I had a pretty good grasp of the jury, Tanuki would have been a key one, particularly on the backside. Anyways, we saw how that ended. I think had some small details been different, in particular had Tanuki not had the chance to go around and demand everyone for whether or not this was the case. And secondly, had Chris nor Nathan won the immunity idols or immunity the following one, I suspect I wouldn't have been the next on the block, but probably came at a good time. So hats off to them.
Well, let's talk about your elimination episode now. Well, basically, the thing I want to point out is Nathan told you that he had the hidden immunity idol, but then he also said, I'm considering putting a vote onto you. Were you surprised that you were being targeted at this time?
Well, obviously, it's not the first thing you expect is someone to sort of tell you, I'm voting for you. It's a terrifying thought. So, I was trying not to, choke on whatever bit of sand I was trying to eat. But it was not entirely illogical. He explained it, and Nathan's always been very good at being fairly logical and fairly sort of consistent in his actions. And he pointed out, exactly as I feared, that because I'd voted for him once, that that's always a niggling point in the back. But at the same time, he had such a sort of blind sort of not hatred. Well, as far as the game is concerned, yes, for Matty, because of the perceived betrayal of this ideal, that I didn't think I was particularly the most obvious target then. So it was a very odd dynamic because in the past, votes been somewhat structured. This one, it really was sort of madness. And Nathan in particular acted in a probably not very strategic way. He acted really sort of triumphantly because he felt that it was clear he was going to go that time round. And so I think just as these things happen in the context of this game of starvation and emotional heightening, and so he became very pleased with himself, and he really lauded this immunity idol, and it really sort of made him come across as he's got the ring of power, and that of course exposed him for the next episode. I think had he not been quite so triumphant about it, he wouldn't have been, immediately the next on the chopping block. That said, had he not used it, well, he used it in a way that guaranteed he got no votes. So it's a very interesting one, but yeah.
I was going to ask, what did you ever consider that Nathan would not, in fact, play the idol?
He made it abundantly clear, and we tried to make it abundantly clear that we would vote for him. So it's a difficult game because in the past he's been very consistent and like, oh, I'll use the idol. So we didn't. I sort of thought, well, if he says he's going to use it, he probably will use it. At the same time, we didn't really have anyone else serious to vote. Like I voted for Hannah, but that was literally based on a last second sort of flail between Matty and I. I was like, okay, let's vote Hannah. And that conversation we had really was very bizarre because we only had a few minutes left to discuss who on earth we should go for, and it ended up being really a case of who left the conversation first. I saw as soon as someone walked out, immediately everyone's like, "Well, let's vote them out." And then this person would walk back, and someone else walk out, and they're like, "Oh, let's go for this one." Well, I clearly walked out at the wrong time to pick my nose somewhere, and all landed on me. But as far as I was concerned, me and Matty were going to vote for Hannah, which is completely a sort of nonsensical vote. There's nothing that she'd ever done to inflame any of us. So it was purely just like, who knows what's going on? Big question mark.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so you and Matthew agreed that you would vote for Hannah. So you were under the impression Matthew would vote for Hannah at that tribal council. If Nathan did play an idol, maybe it would save you for another day. But unfortunately, Laurence, you were voted out at that tribal council. So let me end with this. What is one move you are most proud of?
Well, suggesting there was much brilliance or strategy involved. Well, I don't know. I think I handled, given the limited information and circumstance, the whole fish gate reasonably well. I think that I managed to galvanize quite nicely the Rachel thing, because that came out of nowhere, and I was able to help sort of mobilize votes in one way at a point where I thought I was suddenly at risk out of nowhere. I thought I was quite reasonable despite in my performance of the challenges, particularly the first few, because I'm literally the most incompetent person you can imagine. I literally would trip over a chair if I happened to see one. So the fact that I was able to do anything in any physical challenge was a big sort of motivational lift.
That's great. And one move that led to your downfall?
Well, I suppose the Tanuki one was a big contributing factor. Yeah, perhaps even, I don't know, will we do the dress vote again? That's a crucial one. And also just other people winning idols and doing them. So eventually I would have perhaps I would have saved myself one or two spots, but nevertheless, that's two extra tribal councils to survive. But
would you play again?
Oh, that's a tricky one. The thing is, it's really like running a marathon, like during the marathon, you're like, oh, get me out of here. Like, this is awful. Like, but as soon as the marathon's over, you suppress all the bad memories. You're like, oh, that wasn't too bad. Do that again.
Well, Laurence, I had such a great time talking to you today. Congratulations on the season. I'm excited to see how it's going to all play out in the end. Thank you again, and I hope to talk soon.
Yeah. Well, usually it was a huge pleasure, and glad to blather on about all my mistakes and other juicy bits.
Excellent. Hope to continue the discussion in the future. See you later.